Okay, the question is about how to stay mentally focused in while racing, despite crashes or mechanicals, or kind of when things are not going your way. And so I would approach this. We talk a lot about process goals versus outcome goals. We talk a lot about it in the context of training, but I would apply it here in the context of racing as well. So, an outcome goal would be like a results based goal, a placing or a time or something like that, where a process goal would be something that you're doing kind of along the way that's going to help you in the interest of your outcome goal, but it is kind of a box that you're checking that is separate and, unattached to the outcome itself. So, in training, that might be like, nailing all of your nutrition so that you can set yourself up to do your best in all the workouts. In racing, it might be like a pacing goal, also a fueling goal would apply here as well, or a mindset goal. And so a mindset process goal is kind of specific to what you're asking. I've talked about this previously as part of my own process as a racer. For me, a lot of times I'll make a mindset goal for racing that is being focused on a willingness to suffer, because, it does kind of require, racing does kind of require this extra level of suffering that a place we don't really go to necessarily in training all the time. Another example might be like staying positive, not telling ourselves a story about what is happening, which is really hard to do when you do have a crash or a mechanical. And what I mean by that is a lot of times we'll see racers when things aren't going their way, they're moving backwards in the pack. They're not happy with their position. They have a crash, a mechanical, something, and you start to tell yourself a story, like, I had a really stressful week. I really wasn't set up to succeed here. I had that crash, and now it's really getting in my head. I had a mechanical, and it's, I'm really just suffering because of that. And you kind of start making excuses in your head and telling yourself a story about what is happening. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You start to ride worse as a result of this story that you're telling yourself. And if you can catch yourself telling yourself a story about it, then you can start to manufacture the focus that's required to kind of get back on track. Sometimes it is a bad day, and that's okay too. But I think you feel a lot better at the finish if you are able to let go of the story that you're telling yourself and just focus on what you're doing. And that's, exactly what you're asking. So, here are some steps. And I would preface this to say, if you have a crash and you need to pull out of the race, due to an injury or something like that, that's a different case. I'm certainly never the coach who says DNF or die. Like, we hear these kind of cliches, and to be honest, it's ridiculous. There are times when you need to pull out of a race. If you're injured, you hit your head, you do need to not finish the race, and there are times like that, and that's okay. It can be really hard to evaluate that in the moment, but to the extent that you can, try to make a safe and prudent decision. So those situations notwithstanding, in order to have a mindset process goal like this that's going to set you up to kind of overcome any issues that you have in the race, you're going to need to do some mindset work prior to the race, in order to be prepared to do this. So is your kind of in-race process goal going to be pacing, nutrition, mindset? Choose some items that will help you in the interest of your outcome goal, but they are not your outcome goal. So fueling, pacing, mindset, those are some examples. Commit yourself 100% to that process goal or goals. And if your process goal is related to pacing, you can still pull that off despite any issue that you have, like a crash or a mechanical. I often give people the pacing process goal in race of holding wheels, specifically in off-road racing. And I reference this because I find that off-road athletes, it's kind of standard protocol in road events to focus on holding wheels, but it's not so standard in off-road events, and I think it's really important for off-road riders to learn to do that. The benefits are different. We're not being protected by the wind so much, but if you can hold a wheel and eliminate the mental task of setting a pace, you can save a lot of energy that way and you can go a lot deeper. So this is a pacing goal that I often give to off-road athletes. You can still do that. You have a crash or a mechanical, you get back on your bike, you find a wheel to follow. If you are around slower riders now, then you move from wheel to wheel until you're on an appropriate wheel. So that would be an example of a pacing goal, or a kind of a strategy goal that you might use that is going to be still appropriate no matter what goes wrong in the race. You just pick up where you are and get back with that process goal. I did one of these questions last fall where I talked about, someone had asked me how I stayed focused when I had a crash really early in the race, and I was able to stay engaged and chase my way back from last place to third place. And I did talk about my own process where my in-race process goals were about being willing to suffer and being smooth in the corners. And despite the fact that I had this crash really early in the race, I was well off the back, pretty far behind last place. Those process goals were still totally achievable and allowed me to stay really focused and engaged in the race, despite the fact that it would have been really easy to give up, but I could still, I still had an opportunity to suffer really hard. That was a process goal. And I still had an opportunity to be smooth in the corners. And using those process goals, I was able to chase back up to third because I wasn't telling myself a story about what had happened. That has taken years of work on my part. It's certainly not easy, but this is what I would be focused on, is catching yourself telling a story about what is happening and being prepared by doing some homework prior to the race, doing some visualization on some in-race process goals. So visualization would be like imagining yourself during the race focused on whatever these process goals are, and you're not thinking about an outcome. You don't imagine it being easy. It's not going to be easy. You imagine it being hard, but you imagine yourself rising to the challenge, whatever these process goals are that you're working on, and you're essentially doing a dress rehearsal for your brain in advance of the race. And that way, when things don't go your way during the race, you've already practiced going through that and not allowing it to bother you. So hopefully that sets you up for the next time you have an issue in your race, because there's always going to be one, and you can usually kind of get by despite the additional challenges that come your way on race day.